Hello my fellow working class heroes, good day. I am Carlo and welcome to Carlo Excels. These are the objectives of this episode. Today, finally, we get to talk about the if function. First, let me introduce to you the if series of videos for this channel. We're gonna talk about, in this particular video, the if function definition using the basic if function and the application of the basic if function. If you were to ask every intermediate or expert user of Microsoft Excel, what is the most important function in Microsoft Excel? I think that the if function is going to rank as number one, as the most important function there is. In fact, I'd be very surprised if the results did not turn out that if function was number one. Or if it's not number one, I'd be willing to bet money that the if function would at least be top 5. And that is because the if function is one of the most useful, one of the most versatile functions in Microsoft Excel. It plays well with other functions. And at the same time, the if function can be used in whatever walk of life you belong to. Whether you're an engineer, an architect, a teacher, a statistician, a mathematician, or just a casual user of Microsoft Excel, for as long as you know the if function, you will find a use for it. And yes, the if function is another one of those magic functions. And once again, when I say magic functions, what I'm saying is, if a person who does not know Microsoft Excel sees a person who knows the if function, once the person uses the if function, the other person will be like, magic. Why? What exactly does the if function do? Well, the if function allows you to program Microsoft Excel. The if function allows you to automate the activities of the sheets and the cells in Microsoft Excel based on certain conditions that you set. And because of this, you're able to process and convert hundreds or even thousands of data automatically, once again, based on conditions that you set. Take, for example, this sheet that you see on the screen right now. So you have here something that says display PT, and using data validation, you are asked, using a drop-down box, to select a PT. So using this drop-down box, if I select performance task number 1 here, you will notice that Microsoft Excel only displays performance task number 1. If I select performance task number 3, only PT3 is displayed. If I select PT8, only performance task 8 is displayed. So in this case, you automate what Microsoft Excel is going to show you based on the conditions that you set in this particular cell. Or here's another example of what the if function can do. Using the if function, you can program Microsoft Excel to automatically convert grades into whatever letter equivalent they have based on the grading system of your school. So say for example, we have the grading system of the Department of Education, wherein you have outstanding, very satisfactory, satisfactory, fairly satisfactory, and did not meet expectations. So by simply using an if formula, and when I copy paste this all the way down here, you will notice that Microsoft Excel can automatically process number grades, numerical grades into letter grades very easily based on conditions that you set. Now, of course, I would understand that for beginner users or for basic users of Microsoft Excel, they look at a worksheet that functions like this, or they look at formulas that look like this, and they'll automatically get intimidated by it, thinking that, oh, that's too hard for me, that's not for me, I'll never be able to learn something like that. Well, let me tell you, the if function is actually not difficult to learn. All you have to do is to take the time to know how to tell Microsoft Excel what to do, and just a little bit of practice goes a long way. So how do you use the if function? How do you perform tricks in your Excel worksheet like this? Or how do you perform a more complex data processing like this? How do you use the if function? Well, in this video, I will show you how. Okay, now that I have your attention, let me tell you that I'm not going to discuss everything there is to know about the if function in just this video. I'm going to take it step by step. We're gonna start with the very basics until we get to the most intermediate and advanced parts of the if function. I like to call it the if series of videos. There are 7 videos in this if series. The first video in the if series is something that I actually already did back in lesson 17, the basic logical operators in Excel. If you haven't seen this video yet, you can find a link to this video, the basic logical operators in Excel. You can find a link to that below this video in the descriptions part. In this particular video, we have the second video in the if series, the basics of the if function. The second video in the if series is what you can see on the screen, the nested if functions. What happens if you use multiple if functions simultaneously to create more complex decision-making trees? The fourth lesson in the if series talks about the basic logical operators of Microsoft Excel. So you have the true function, the false function, the exact function, and the not function. Knowing these will be useful for setting conditions in Microsoft Excel's if function. The next video in this if series talks about the or and the and logical operators in Excel, which will allow you to ask Microsoft Excel to perform more complex decision making. The next video in the if series are the is series of logical operators. This allows you to ask Microsoft Excel to perform very specific, very minute kinds of decision making. And the last video of the if series is the if error function, which allows you to automate what Microsoft Excel will do if in case there is an error. No more error displays in your worksheet for as long as you know how to use the if error function. And with all of that, so that you are fully updated with the release of all of the videos in the if series, please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss those episodes when they come. And so, enough of the introduction, let's go to the if function. The if function, from Microsoft Excel's own help document. The if function returns one value if a condition you specify evaluates to true, and another value if the condition you specify evaluates to false. So for the if function, the function name is if, and for the function arguments, you have first the logical test, and then you're gonna need the value if true, and then you're gonna need the value if false. Essentially, when you use the if function, the formula for the if function looks like what you can see on the screen. So you have here the equal sign, of course, and then you call out the if function and then open parenthesis. The first thing that Microsoft Excel is going to ask from you is the logical test. So I am color coding that in blue so that it's easier to see. And then next, the value if it is true, which is in green, and then the value if it is false, which is colored in red. So do not get intimidated by what looks like computer code on the screen. This is actually very easy to understand for as long as you take the time to understand what the logical test, the value if true, and the value if false are. First of all, let me explain the logical test. The logical test is actually easy to understand. This is just a question. This is a question that you ask Microsoft Excel, which Excel can answer in just two ways. It is either true or false. Again, it is a question that Microsoft Excel can answer using true or false. It can either be a basic logical operator or a logical function. So because this is just the first video in the if series, for this video, we're going to use basic logical operators. Later on, we can move to logical functions. Next, let's talk about the value if true. This part here. This is what Excel will do or display on the cell if the logical test turns out to be true. The value if true can either be a constant value, it can be a constant text, it can be a cell reference, it can be a formula, or a function. And the last part of the if function is the value if false. This is what Excel will do or display on the cell if the logical test is false. Again, the value if false can be a constant value, it can be a constant text, it can be a cell reference, a formula, or a function. So to break all that down and to state it very simply, the if function is a question. Think of it as a decision-making tree, a very basic decision-making tree. You ask Microsoft Excel whether something is true or false, and then you give instructions to Microsoft Excel. This is what you do when it's true, and then this is what you do when it's false. So the logical test is the question. This is where you ask Microsoft Excel, is this true or false? The value if true is what Microsoft Excel will do according to your instructions, what it will do if the logical test is true. And the value if false part, according to your instructions, is what Excel will do if the logical test turns out to be false. So for those of you who are not very much into words and like diagrams, it's kind of like this. You ask Microsoft Excel a question. Is this true or false? If it is true, then Microsoft Excel is going to execute some sort of instruction based on your specifications. If this question turns out to be false, then Microsoft Excel executes another outcome, another set of instructions based on your specifications. So for the next parts of this video, I'm going to give you 3 examples of how the if function works. We're gonna take this step by step, and in fact, I do suggest that if you're watching this on your computer, you pause the video from time to time, you open your Microsoft Excel worksheet, and then you try the formulas out for yourself so that you see how they work. And after those 3 basic samples of the if function, I'm going to show you an example of a practical application of the if function, something that we can really use as teachers. So here's our first example. So you can see on the sheet here, we have a space that says enter number here, and we have a space that says result over here. Now let's say, just as an example, we want to enter a number here, and then we want Microsoft Excel to display something based on the number that we entered here. So say for example, we enter a number here, and if the number is less than 10, let's write that down here so it's easy for us to remember. If the value that we enter here is less than 10, we want Microsoft Excel to display the number 1000 on this cell here. Again, if the number we enter here is less than 10, then the result that is going to be displayed here is going to be this number, 1000. However, if the value is greater than 10, if the value that we enter in this space here is greater than 10, then we're going to display a message here, and the message is going to be something like, no, it is not less than 10. So take note, first of all, that this is the cell that we want to evaluate, and this is the cell wherein we want to produce the result. So therefore, we place the if function here in the result cell, not the cell that we want to evaluate, but rather the cell wherein we want to place the result. And now let's call out the if function. So press the equal sign, call out the if function name like so, and then open parenthesis. So the first thing that Microsoft Excel again is going to ask from us is the logical test. For this lesson, we're going to use the basic logical operators in Microsoft Excel. If you've already forgotten what the basic logical operators are from a previous lesson, let me display that. From a previous lesson, a logical operator in Excel is a comparison of 2 values using a statement, and Excel then returns the result of the statement whether the statement is true or false. That is from our lesson on basic logical operators. The logical operators are, as you can see on the screen. So when you want to evaluate using equal to, you use the equal sign. Not equal to are the 2 arrow signs, greater than or equal to, pointing opposite each other. So this is not equal to, this is greater than, this is less than, this is greater than or equal to, and this is less than or equal to. So going back here, we want our logical test. And once again, the question that we want to ask Microsoft Excel is over here. Is it less than 10? Is the number here less than 10? So let's write it down here. If, and the logical test is cell A2, just like what you can see on the screen right now, is cell A2 less than 10? Alright? That is how you write the logical test as a question. I did not mean it literally like write a question mark like that. No. You press the comma, and this is the logical test. You're asking Microsoft Excel, is A2 less than 10? So that is the logical test. Next, now that we have our logical test here, let's enter the value if true. So the value if true, once again, this is what Microsoft Excel is going to display or do in this cell if this turns out to be true. So once again, if the value is less than 10, just like what we mentioned a while ago, if the value is less than 10, then this should be 1000. So the value if true is 1000, like so. So all you have to do is declare the value as the value if true. And then we can enter a comma to go to the value if false. So as for the value if false, we want to display this text data over here. And the text data says, no, it is not less than 10. So all you have to do is to, because it is text data, once again, we use the quotation mark for that. Quotation mark, and then no, comma, it is not less than 10, like so, quotation mark. Now that we have our logical test and then our value if true, and then our value if false, we can then close the if function like so, and then press enter. That is the if function. So let's try out our if function. So it says already there, the result is already 1000. Now why is that? Because the cell is blank, so therefore the cell has a value of 0. That is why 0 is less than 10. As you can see here, 0 is less than 10, so therefore it is displaying the value if true, which is 1000. So that is why it is displaying 1000 right now. So if I put here 0, 0 is less than 10, so it is still 1000. 1 is also less than 10, 2 is less than 10, so is 3, so is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But once we go to 10, 10 is not less than 10 because 10 is equal to 10. So therefore, if I press 10 here, you will notice that Microsoft Excel is now displaying the false condition. It is now saying, no, it is not less than 10. So that is how the if function works. Next example. Let's allow the user to enter some sort of text password here, and then we will display a result based on the password that is entered by the user here. So let's say, for example, that the password is the name of the channel, Carlo Excels, like so. So what we want to do is, if the user successfully enters this correct password, which is Carlo Excels without a space, then the result is going to display 1000. If the user is going to enter something else, then the result here displays the words password incorrect. So let's call out the if function. If, and then open parenthesis. Now it's looking for a logical test. So the logical test, once again, is a question. So the question we want to ask Microsoft Excel is cell A2 equals the text data Carlo Excels, like so. So this is asking Microsoft Excel to look at cell A2 and then check if the cell A2 has the text data Carlo Excels. And then we press the comma to go to the next argument, which is value if true. So for the value if true, as mentioned before, the value if true, this particular argument does not necessarily have to be constant text or constant numbers. It can be a cell reference, it can be a formula, it can be a function. So let's try cell references now. So let's say, for example, if cell A2 says Carlo Excels, if that statement is true, then let's ask this cell here to display cell C2. So let's do a cell reference, cell C2, like so. And then if the value is false, if the statement is false, rather, if A2 says something else or has anything else rather aside from Carlo Excels, then display this cell here. And then press enter. So in layman's terms, what you're essentially asking Microsoft Excel is, check cell A2 if it says Carlo Excels. If it says Carlo Excels, value if true. If it says Carlo Excels, take whatever value is in C2 and place it here in the result cell. If it is false, take whatever value is in cell C4 and put it in the results. That is why right now the value, the cell A2 is still blank, so therefore it does not say Carlo Excels, and therefore it says password incorrect. However, if I type in any random letters here, password is still incorrect. Password is still incorrect. Password is still incorrect. But if I now enter the correct password, which is Carlo Excels, like so, now the if function evaluates the statement A2 is equal to Carlo Excels as true. And because it is true now, it is now displaying cell C2. Now, please take note that in this situation, using the basic logical operator, it is not case sensitive. So therefore, I can type Carlo Excels like this. And if I do that, Microsoft Excel is still going to evaluate the statement as true because, again, basic logical operators as far as text is concerned is not case sensitive. If you want this to be case sensitive, you're going to need the exact logical operator for that, which is going to be a next lesson. So for our next example, you can see on the screen, we have here is a series of cells over here. You have 10 cells, and then you have a result cell here. Say, for example, we're going to ask users to enter numbers here, and then we want the result cell to do something different with the numbers based on certain conditions. Take for example, if the sum of these cells is less than 50, right? If you add all of those cells and the sum is less than 50, then we want the result here to display the sum of the cells. If the sum of these cells is greater than or equal to 50, then we want the result here to be not the sum, but rather the average of these cells. So let's try that out. Let's put it here on the results part, the equal sign to call out the if function and then open parenthesis. So now we're looking for the logical test. So our logical test is the sum of these, is the sum of these cells here, right? Is the sum of these cells here less than 50? Like so. So you're asking Microsoft Excel in the formula, take the sum of these cells and then check if they are less than 50. So if the sum of the cells is less than 50, then we want Microsoft Excel to sum these cells. So that is the value if true. And then just like we stated, if the sum of these cells is not less than 50, in other words, if the logical test turns out to be false, then we want Microsoft Excel to instead average these cells, like so. So you will notice in this case that the value if true and the value if false are not constants. They're not constant values, they're not constant text, and they're not cell references. They're in fact formulas and functions. And so let's press enter. And you will see, of course, the result is 0 because there is nothing to sum. And because there's nothing to sum, it is less than 50. So therefore, there's nothing to sum. So let's try entering values here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for as long as the sum is less than 50, the result keeps on summing. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the sum is 45. In this case, the sum is 45. So therefore, Microsoft Excel is still summing because the sum is still less than 50. But the moment the sum becomes more than 50, then Microsoft Excel is now averaging it based on the specifications you set on the if function. So some of you may be wondering, well, you used this as the condition. If the sum is less than 50, then sum or else average it. Can you do it the other way around? Can you do it, for example, if the sum is greater than or equal to 50, then average or else sum this? In other words, this is the value if true and then this is the value if false. Yes, you actually can reverse the conditions and the value if true and the value if false. So let's do that. If the sum, let's first delete the values here, like so. So let's do that. If the sum of these cells is greater than or equal to 50, then average these cells or else sum these cells, like so. So logically speaking, the effect is going to be exactly the same. For as long as the sum of the series, the sum of these cells is not greater than or equal to 50, then it keeps on summing. The moment it does become greater than or equal to 50, then it will start averaging. So that's it for basic samples of the if function. Now let's move on to a sample that you might encounter or you might actually use as a teacher. So what you can see right now are grades of students as they submitted their performance tasks to you. So you had 8 performance tasks in the quarter. That's a lot of performance tasks, but you had 8 of them in the quarter, and these are their corresponding grades. So you want to average these performance tasks, but you will see that for some of them, because of their low performance task grades, naturally, if you have low performance task grades, you will have low averages. Now, say for example, you want to encourage students. You don't want to discourage them. You want to make them feel that doing their performance tasks and submitting performance tasks were worth it. You don't want students to feel like, I submitted my performance tasks, but my grades are still low, so therefore it's not worth it to do performance tasks. You don't want to make students feel that way. So therefore, for example, you want to set a minimum grade as far as your PT averages are concerned. So as a solution, what we're going to do is this. We're going to average the performance task grades of each and every student. If the performance task grade, the average performance task grade of the student is greater than 80, then it's greater than 80, congratulations to the student. But if it is less than 80, then we will set it to 80. In other words, no performance task average grade will be less than 80. It is either greater than 80 or 80. So I hope by now, if you have been following our previous examples, I hope by now you are starting to craft the if function in your mind. So you can see there the condition, the value if true, and the value if false. So you can see there, calculate the average of these cells. If the average of these cells is less than 80, then the value should be 80. If it is greater than 80, greater than or equal to 80, then we just allow the average to be whatever it is. So let's write an if function for that. So equal sign, if, like so. Logical test. So we want to evaluate the average of these grades here, like so. Average of these grades, and then we want to ask Microsoft Excel, is the average of those grades less than 80? So that is the logical test. So that is the logical test. If that is true, then we want to set the grade to 80. So that is our value if true. So 80, like so. And then, if the average is not less than 80, if it is greater than or equal to 80, in other words, if this logical test is false, then we allow the average to be whatever it is. So, as far as the value if false is concerned, then the average of these cells here. So that is the average. That is the value if false. So let's finish up the function like so, and then let's reevaluate it. So once again, this is the logical test. You ask Microsoft Excel, is the average of these cells here, is the average less than 80? If it is less than 80, then set the average to 80. Set the grade to 80. If it is not less than 80, then allow the average to be whatever it is. And then press enter. So of course, as you can see here, in this particular row of performance task grades, this is obviously less than 80 because all of the grades are line of 7. But you will see that even though they are all less than 80, because of our if function, we declared a minimum grade, and the minimum grade has been set here, which is 80. And because we're using relative references here, we can simply copy that, paste it all the way down here, and you will notice, of course, that Microsoft Excel has performed the setting of the minimum grade for you. So therefore, you will now see here, for as long as the average grade is greater than 80, then the students get whatever grade they deserve. But if the average is less than 80, then you have set a minimum grade of 80. So those are the basics of the if function. Once again, if in case you're having trouble understanding some parts of this video, I do suggest that you rewind and rewatch some parts of the video that you do not understand, and then practice as you go along. Hopefully, you will understand the if function by then. Now, so far, what we've been doing is this. So we're asking Microsoft Excel to evaluate one question and then select outcomes based on whether the question is true or false. But that is not the only way to use the if function. In fact, it can even be arranged like this. In other words, you have multiple if functions functioning together. So for example, just like what you can see here on the diagram, you ask Microsoft Excel a question. If it is true, then you ask Microsoft Excel another question to evaluate whether it's true or false. So instead of having just 2 outcomes, you now have 3 outcomes in this chain. In fact, it doesn't have to be like this. It can also look like this, for example, also 3 outcomes. But in this case, the chain splits on the false part. So you ask Microsoft Excel a question. If it is true, then you get an outcome. If it is false, then you ask Microsoft Excel another question and then evaluate it again if it is true or false. So in this case, 3 outcomes again. You can even do it this way, just like what you can see on the screen. Ask Microsoft Excel a question to evaluate it if it is true or false. If it is true, ask another question to evaluate if it is true or false. If it is false, ask another question. So in this case, you will have 4 different outcomes based on the chain of Microsoft Excel evaluating your logical tests. And yes, you can continue branching out. So what you can see now on the screen are chains of questions to Microsoft Excel with 5 outcomes. So how do we do this? How do we have, instead of just one if function, you have multiple if functions that creates many different outcomes? Well, this is the subject of our next lesson, which is the nested if functions. So once again, please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that lesson when it comes. So that's it for our lesson on the basics of the if function. I hope I earned your subscription today. Once again, I am Carlo, and this is Carlo Excels. Thank you very much for watching.